everyone, welcome to the Graybeard Wisdom Podcast. Graybeard Wisdom celebrates earned insight, and Chef Joshua Ingram delivers it with championship grit and visionary drive. From leading culinary ops for Major League Baseball and National Hockey League teams to competing on national television, Joshua blends elite performance with practical innovation. Now he's breaking ground in food tech with Prep Cook AI, a smart kitchen system born from bold reinvention. His journey proves that wisdom isn't just about reflection, it's about action. And today we sit down with Joshua to explore how he's channeling decades of culinary excellence into a tech driven future. One lesson, one line of code, and one bold idea at a time. Welcome, Joshua.
Thanks, Mark, for having me. I appreciate it. That's a phenomenal intro right there. Thank you.
Hey man, I saw your stuff and I just got blown away by your career and what you've been through and all of that kind of stuff. And you know, you've worn many hats. You're a chef, athlete, coder, innovator. Maybe tell our audience a little bit more about you. And then
Mhm.
I'm curious about, you know, when you look in the mirror today, who do you see first with all of that in the background, man?
I am a constant work in progress. I
Wow.
am iterating and evolving. I think it's the goals that are in front of me at the time definitely push me towards where I want to be. And when you're younger and you're trying to discover who you are and what impact you want to make on the world, it's a little bit easier because you can stay focused on just going to work and repeating that process and trying to be the best. And but as you start to add those layers of life on, and I got a wife, and we start having kids, and
Yep.
she's like, I don't want to live in Boston anymore. We're gonna move to Cleveland, and it's like it was, that's when everything starts to become real, and you start to ask yourself those questions. You're like, am
Yep.
I on the right path? Am I making the biggest impact? And I think that's what really shaped the basis of the story of like kind of where I came today. But it was so inspiring to have, my first child. That's when I decided to, push myself as an athlete and kind of live up to everything that I was saying. And I think when we, chefs getting into food, everybody's got to kind of find their place. And what are you going to be? Are you going to, go to New York City and you're going to, go for that Michelin star? Are you going to, be impactful in a healthcare setting or something else? And I kind of went a different route. I went through sports. Went in college. I was a collegiate athlete, played baseball, and so in the back of my mind, I kind of always thought that maybe there was a chance I'd be a baseball player, but always have to have that fallback. And so it was
Yep.
ironic when I got to the major leagues as an executive chef later on, because I made it, I just didn't make it as a player. And that's where the rabbit hole started as far as like what kind of food and the whole thing that we'll talk about. But I see myself right now as still a builder. I mean, I've always loved to create. I think that's what really drew me into food, and
Yep.
that being the medium and the palate, and combining ingredients. And the as a chef, you're only as good as your last meal, and that's also part of the pressure. So it's like, as soon as you
Yep.
see something go up on LinkedIn or Instagram, that chef is working on what's next, and it's one of those things that just never stops. So it really, looking at again, higher impact, what I could do. I wanted to be a solution to just living a better life and not seeing all of the burnt out chefs across the our industry, specifically what we just went through with the pandemic, right? So loaded
Yep.
question there, but that's basically, in a nutshell, kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, that's interesting, you know, because I kind of played a little bit in that space as well. You know, I told you earlier that I spent 26 years um, feeding college kids, and then you know, as you said, life comes into it, and I thought, man, you know, do I want to work all these hours? And I want to work on Mother's Day and Father's Day? So I looked at corporate food service and it was like I had died and gone to heaven. It was like, you know, 2 meals a day, 5 days a week. And it was like, oh my God, I could see my kids, I could see all that. So I kind of relate to what you're talking about. And then one of the other things that pops into my head is as you were talking about sports and you know, again, my time at Microsoft, we did a lot of different stuff. And I'm up here in Seattle, and we have the Seattle Seahawks, right? And so I went over there to the Seahawks, you know, training facility, and talked to the chefs and watched them feed the athletes. And man, I was blown away by how important the meal and the food was with, you know, to their conditioning and to their performance, right? I mean, it's just phenomenal. How, I mean, take us through some of that stuff about how you dealt with these, you know, some kind of athletes that don't always want to do what you tell them, you know?
Well, luckily we're in an age right now with the abundance of science, right? And so there we have access to just information like overload almost. And so and even these
Yeah,
players, they're getting it as well, right? So I think we're past the point, and it was you're right, it was definitely different, 10 years ago. And getting into sports initially in Boston, with the Celtics and Bruins, and it was really about what, could they consume the amount of calories that they need per day. And that's really superficial when it comes down to like performance food and what the athlete actually needs. Too, later on when I was in Cleveland, I was actually performance chef for Odell Beckham Jr. So like we're counting his steps as he's performing in his game, and that's helping us calculate what we need on the back end, knowing that when he gets back home, he's still going to practice that evening. And so like everything throughout the entire day, and we had like 5 meals a day, and everything was specifically detailed out to the types of foods that are going to help him recover quicker. And I will never forget because he'd always come through the kitchen and say, "Chef, give me some of that vegan stuff." And I'm like, okay, so I knew he, wanted to try some more vegetables because he knew the benefit. These are whole foods. This is like the, nature's vitamins right here. But he'd
yeah.
also seen game changers, right? So he was watching this other, these documentaries come out and this information. So he was very aware, and of course we had, team doctors and scientists and stuff, and people who were working with the athlete nonstop all throughout the day. I mean, the schedules throughout the week were pretty routine, right? Who would come in on Tuesday and Wednesday, and who prepare for Thursday and get ready for the weekend. And but that consistency right there with nutrition, the consistency, looking at the workload was what helped us prepare him for the best game next. And when I first got into sports, I'm looking at as the chef for the Cleveland Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians. 37,000 of your closest fans. Concessions is a completely different ball game, right? No pun intended. But it's like it is. You've got to produce, high quality food like a lot so people can all enjoy it, and it's all about the experience. But then if you go down into the dugout and you go down into the clubhouse and you see what's going on in the cafe, for these players and their routines, some of them are there 10 hours before a game. So their routine starts at a whole different time period where they're having their mini workout sessions, and they're stretching, and some are even getting their haircuts done, right? So, but in between, they're loaded up in protein shakes and eating whole foods and stuff, and because they know that they like to eat a certain amount of hours before they play a game. It's so timed out. I don't think people understand the amount of work that goes into being a professional athlete at that level, and to be exposed to that as a chef is like it was mind blowing. And I think that's what really kind of pivoted my existence as a chef. That I didn't want to be just the guy who came up with the special for the seventh inning. I really want to dig deeper into the performance food and how that was going to make a bigger impact on my community. And that's where later down the road I got a chance to partner up with some doctors around the world that were pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, they were pretty phenomenal. And I guess, it's so funny because all this stuff that I did comes to my mind. And again, we were at the training camp for the Seahawks, and they take their blood and analyze their blood and what's going on, and linemen eat different than running backs, and just all the stuff. But to me, the idea of the athlete really understanding that this helps them, and how it really, gives them that extra edge. And all of a sudden now a chef becomes really important in the training exercise because they're fueling their body with that, right? I mean, it's just, that's great. That's fantastic.
It
Um,
becomes part of like the strategy versus just flavor. And flavor's involved, but that becomes like the story of food, right? It's like we were talking earlier, like what's the different, is it science based or is it flavor based or soul? Like what really drives, the food specifically in what I'm doing. And I think it's kind of both, right? Like you need the science to keep you grounded, to like show you this is why we are creating these meals, but you need the flavor and the soul because that's what creates craveability. And none of the players are going to just have a green smoothie because it tastes great. They're going to convince themselves because it is good for them. And then you've got to kind of sell them on that whole part. Like, hey, we just did, this is the garden out back. We utilize some of the stuff right here. Like it's got your favorite apples in it. Like you just got to kind of connect them to something that's going to, tell that story, which is going to connect the soul. And then it becomes part of the routine right there. Right. So yeah, it's once you get to that part of performance food and food as medicine, even when the doctors are prescribing, meals, it's all part of the strategy.
yeah, yeah, totally. And I want to explore this. I'm kind of getting, we got other questions to go here, but this is interesting to me, and I think probably our audience. But and again, you're going to talk at our next explosions meeting, and it's around food as medicine. So I want to kind of spend some time on this. But how does it? Again, I watched the college world. I went to Stanford. They had a whole section of their dining hall was just for performance athletes, and they had special food there for them to eat. And I thought, when I went to Ford, I watched the union worker on the line making these cars and trucks, and I thought, that's a performance athlete too. And so
Yeah.
how can you bridge the gap, I guess, between moving it from a performance athlete that's making a pile of money to, a line worker or just a normal person that that can use that food as, taking care of their body, taking care of their mind, all this kind of stuff. How do you transfer that to, the real world?
I call it the corporate athlete. And so we you actually it's all about routine, and it's very they're very much alike. And you shouldn't just look at the elite athlete and say, oh well, that's because they're an elite athlete. Yeah, they're training a little bit differently. They've got a more focus. They don't have the chaos around them necessarily. There's still quite a bit of chaos, but
Yeah,
there's somebody between them kind of the whole time saying, nope, stay over here, and we want
yeah,
one more hour before this, and you got to kind of move and groove with that one right there. But as far as like the corporate athlete, like how does our days unfold? Well, we should be, preparing ourselves throughout the day for our maximum performance. And sometimes we get caught up with what tastes good and what's marketing, to us, and powering through with more caffeine. And actually, one of the tricks that I've learned, I'm a true coffee drinker. I drink it
me
black, love
too.
it. I love, finding
Yep.
new, beans and things, a single orange origin, and like yeah, exactly. and but the moment I wake up in the morning, if I can give myself 30 minutes to wake up, and I can hydrate myself with maybe a little bit of water, some lemon water, something that's just going to help me kind of just wake up first, it actually changes how much coffee I need throughout the day. If I wake up and just say, oh, I need coffee, I start drinking it. Before noon, I'm probably at my fourth cup of coffee. And, I'm not feeling amazing. I mean, I'm
Right.
actually I need more coffee. And so that whole part of the day shapes the rest of the day, and then the nutrients comes after that, right? So you got to prime yourself. You got to get yourself in a position where your body is ready to absorb the next meal. And then you got to think of it like where we've been told so many things. I think that's what, if somebody's marketing something to you, my first question would be why? Because it should not just be automatically for everybody. And that's the lesson learned from any of the athletes, right? This athlete's going to perform completely different than this one. And just as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that lineman's going to be, consuming differently than the next one before them, right? So we are the same people. We're the same way. We're not all going to have the same tricks. But so we should look at our bodies. We should do an analysis. I always like people to start with like an allergen analysis to kind of see like what their body is, how they're absorbing nutrients, and because people are surprised often when they find that they have some type of allergy to something. They're like, oh my gosh, I eat a lot of bread and I've never felt amazing, and I have a gluten sensitivity, which is very common nowadays, right? Because the dwarf wheats and things that we use to
Yeah.
produce crops so fast, right? So
Yep.
those are, but we're marketed, donuts and bagels, and start your day off with pancakes. It's like, whew, then you look at the glucose and just like how your body operates. And so we've got those glucose trackers, another great way to kind of see your ebbs and flows throughout a day. Not that everybody needs one, but if you tried it for 2 weeks and just kind of see what foods are really hitting you, like you'll notice it could be the afternoon snack that you, when you're tired and you're grabbing that donut or something else, like, or that sandwich versus the salad, it might be the reason why you're not performing well at the end of the day. And so then, as I see myself as a corporate athlete, I actually schedule myself certain times a day for certain tasks. And so when I'm waking up in the morning, that's not when I'm digging into a big project. Like when I get to like 11 or 12, I feel pretty good. And I start to get into, I would say, a good hour and a half of work where I can really focus, not get bothered, and get into like some deep analytics. Then there's going to be that kind of lag afternoon where you do need to recharge, whether it's food or just taking a break or a walk. Actually, I think sometimes when I take those afternoon walks, because I do work from home a lot, that's when I feel the best. I get most
Yep.
energy back. And 2 o'clock comes around and I power right through till 5, and I'm very focused. And it didn't have really much to do with, oh, I didn't miss lunch today, or I had to make sure I got breakfast, because those are misnomers as well. You have to listen to your body. And, to become that corporate athlete, you got to put yourself in the mindset that every single day, just like they are, I want to catch 10 receptions. I'm going to run these routes. Well, what are we going to do today? We don't just walk into a day saying, I have a couple meetings. I might get to this. I'm not sure if I'll do that. Like it should be equally as planned, and you'll start to get results when you start to plan your day like that. So I think it's yeah, that's a big rabbit hole there. I was actually working on some literature to go with the corporate athlete. As I was talking to Maggie Stefanik, somebody who I greatly admire, and she has such a passion for food as medicine, and we connected a long time ago at the Cleveland Clinic. We were jiving about food as medicine, and we were like, oh my god, the corporate athlete. And, like it makes so much sense. That would be how we use food as medicine and
Yeah,
on our daily lives beyond just an elite athlete or a patient.
yeah. Gosh, you bring up a lot of stuff that triggers me, but yeah, so sensors. You talked about measuring your glucose and measuring your, what's going on with your body, and I suppose if you did it like for 7 days, it starts to tell you a story. But
Yep.
how does the normal person, I mean, you worked in a hospital setting or whatever. I mean, how does a normal person like me get those sensors to be able to do that? Do you have to go to your doctor or do you, I mean, how does that work?
You can go to your doctor. I would say because I'm not a medical professional, I would suggest that first.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, for
because
sure.
you can get access to them, and they're not hard, and you don't need a prescription necessarily for them. But it does kind of tell, like you said, a story, and it's important because of the way that food is manufactured for us today. It definitely disrupts our glucose. When you look at the glucose, you're looking at how the body is burning food primarily. Like the brain feeds off of sugar. It's going to convert things, right? But when we burn sugar at a high rate, we start to oxidize inside. We start to basically age from the inside out, right? So that's the negative effect of having, sugar cereals, a sweet dessert for lunch, or a coffee colada, like something like that was it's easy to get to, and you say, I didn't really eat anything today. Oh, but you probably drank plenty of sugar, like enough that it's really affecting your body inside, right? So that's where the glucose comes into play because there's so many different symptoms when you walk down that road into reducing inflammatory stuff, right? So and that's whether you're sleeping well, you step up from the seat after a meeting and you go, oh my gosh, like my legs, like all these different feelings we feel all day long because we're just constantly sitting when we shouldn't be, right? It's those there's I think that's the first place for somebody to kind of see where they're at. What are symptoms are you feeling? Like, do you feel lethargic? Are you feeling sore? Do you not get good sleep? Like that's where it starts. You with your feet, with your hands. Take a look at your skin. Like there's different. I always in the morning too. I do this to the kids. I say, hey, let's go outside and touch some grass, and they're like, okay. And I'm trying to ground them, right? I'm just for a minute, just to go outside, have my coffee before anything starts in the day because it will take us wherever it wants to go, right? But you've got to get that, first sunlight is the best sunlight, right? Because it doesn't have all the UV rays. So it's actually the probably the most convertible vitamin D you'll get. And then when you put your feet on the grass, it's there's an electrical kind of meridian right there that's going to help kind of reset the blood flow in your body. And they've done experiments where they measured blood before and afterwards, and you can just see how it kind of like untangles itself after being on grass for more than 30 minutes. So like simple things like that, I tell people to do all the time.
Well, yeah, and then there's this kind of side benefit is that the kids will always remember going outside and touching the grass with dad. I mean, even for their whole lives, they'll probably remember that whole,
Yep.
routine, if you will. I mean, that's good family bonding too. So, well, okay, so you've done a lot in the kitchen. And you've got this, food is medicine kind of thing going on. How did you get from that to technology and coding? I mean, that sounds like a big jump.
It was. I think, I had a lot of what I called screen time, driving between accounts. And, you just kind of get into podcasts and things. And I'm, you know, whether it's I actually enjoy self-help books. I really just kind of like to hear like
Yeah.
the mindset and like things, like not that I'm like, like, oh, I really need this. It's just like, you never know what nugget you're going to get that's going to just change your perception on a few things. And all of a sudden you just kind of, you see things differently. Right.
Yep.
And I think that's, I was really lucky to stumble upon this podcast. It was a new program about a year ago. There's a few out now. This one was called Bolt.new. There's other ones out like called Replit that people are using. And I'm sure you heard the term like vibe code. And it's really just like prompting to AI. And and kind of like massaging it into a product, and it's building a full stack product behind the background. And so at first, getting introduced to all this stuff, I mean, I giving myself the permission, I think, was the hardest, because I don't see many chefs out there trying this stuff, right? So I don't have anybody to look at and say, "Oh yeah, that's how you do it." I've got to kind of like learn on the fly, and it's very intimidating because I don't have a background at all when it comes to coding specifically. Actually,
Yeah,
ironically, I tried one of those apps to teach myself a couple years ago, but then this like whole AI explosion happened, and it's like, well, now they can code better. We need somebody who can learn, who knows the code, who can help them, kind of, create the better stuff. And so I kind of dropped the app and then went towards this vibe coding. And to me, as a chef, again, remember, I like to create, so I like ingredients, but I'm a problem solver. And as soon as I started kind of building Prep Cook, I realized I was solving every single problem I've had in the last 20 years. And it is beautiful. And it's taken me, it took me a while to kind of to iterate and get there, but I gave myself permission to fail, and I failed a lot. And I found myself, many nights into the wee morning where my wife's like, I'm going to bed. And I'm like, I'm still going. And, I'd not say like I'd put myself to sleep, talking to AI. I do have some friends, but it is, that's how I was learning. I was like really having conversations, kind of like, well, what about this? What about that? And it helped me kind of, structure my builds going forward. And actually just competed in a hackathon, my first no code hackathon. Um, and yeah, pretty cool. So I built a game. I
yeah,
uh, some other things for people, but specifically, yeah, prep cook was really cool because over 20 years of cooking, there's plenty of times where you throw your hands up and you're just like, what are we going to do? Half the staff showed up today. We're not organized. We didn't get the orders in. Like there's always something in food that prevents you from being perfect every single day, right? So and then, as I continue my career and I got, a great chance to work for some of these bigger companies, everybody's using a piece of some other program that's out there, but none of the programs are meant to kind of move with you. And I think that's what really got me, is that you're using a bigger platform, but the bigger platform has to be, basic enough that everybody can use it at whatever level. But everybody's growing at a different rate. Everybody's got different challenges and obstacles. We're all in the same kind of niche, but we're not presenting ourselves in the same way. And I think if you peel back and you look at the back end and see that everybody's kind of connected to some of these big systems the same, then there's really nothing different about us. So there was a lot going into developing Prep Cook because I realized it could be intuitive. It could do the back end work that's going to allow those chefs to not feel burnt out. And so what this system does, I created, is we're creating a schedule. You're creating a prep list based on your menu that you have, and then it sends it out. And every cook has their own interface, and they can see their schedule, their tasks for the next day. They have access to the recipes, and then it keeps track of all their stats, which is the coolest part. So then that's that's pretty far down the rabbit hole. But if somebody was to
no,
compare,
keep going. I love this rabbit hole. Keep going.
yeah, somebody compares like an efficiency score to a credit score, it's something that you kind of carry on with you, right? So the idea of this was, we connect prep cooks to their kitchen via a kitchen code, which means they can unconnect and they connect to another kitchen if needed. So if there's multiple kitchens that are using prep cook, and they take on a cook that they hire, they're like, oh, I've been using prep cook over my other kitchen. Oh, great! And so we can link you on, and I can see your efficiency scores. And so this is, how often you are within range on your temperatures, your wastes, the time it took you to complete a task, what types of tasks you were completing. So from a chef, I can say, oh, you're really good at this, and oh, you're not so good at this. So I'm looking at my kitchen in live time, and I'm looking at, who's contributing most to the waste, and I've got all my logs ready for health and regulatory, like right there at a click of a button. And it's still being done by a human. I think that's the whole point of it. I looked at this type of technology not to replace, but to elevate. And I think that's the important part, is we go back to the soul of cooking. You're just never going to replace that chef. Like I've seen, some robots produce some food, and it's always about, can they produce enough in amount of time to justify the ROI on having that robot in the first place? And it's going to be a little while before they do, right? And then somebody's like, well, we should replace, the dishwasher with a dishwasher robot. It's like, I get it. They don't have to take breaks, but there's still going to be a large place in a service industry that's going to need human beings. And so can we look at, not replacing them necessarily, because that's not fun for them to think about. Can we give them something that's going to enhance their work experience and make them feel like they are there's no longer that skill gap, which I think we're starting to really recognize after the pandemic, is that the entrance workers that are coming into food don't have the culinary backgrounds. They haven't been to school. They're kind of lost. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to sign up to do your taxes, right? And I'm not going to, do surgery on you. Like there's certain fields you just can't walk in off the street. But food, we take whoever we can get and we say, you're going to show up tomorrow, right? You got a ride? Yes, absolutely. And all of a sudden you're doing the grab and go, for, 1,500 bed hospital. And that's a lot. That's why I think why we have so much turnover is that there is skill to it. We have lost our way as far as like keeping everybody into the learning circle. And the culinary schools that were in abundance before are shutting down because can you justify going to school, and we know how much college is, and then coming out and then earning a minimum wage or $15 an hour, and how do you catch up? Like where is that gap? The promise for you to be the chef, the promise for you to lead the kitchen, it could be years away. And it's I think it's a very hard ceiling to break. And so that's when I saw the opportunity in the world kind of evolving. I want to lead, but you have to lead from in front, and you have to like take those chances to like really understand something. And I do fail a lot. So don't get me wrong, I do fail a lot, but it's all in good spirit and knowing that, if I can get a little bit better every single time, maybe I can create something really meaningful. And so, yeah, prep cook to me is probably the coolest thing I've ever created.
So, yeah, so again, I got a bazillion questions that went on in that conversation that you just went through, but and I completely get the idea of, at Microsoft, we called it the growth mentality. It's fail fast and
Mhm.
move on.
Yeah.
And it was constant to be to doing that, And the interesting thing about that concept is that from a food perspective, we could try all kinds of different things in the food program there,
Mhm.
and the audience, our customers, were acceptance of failure because that's what they dealt with all the time was, break fix, break fix, break fix. That's what they were. So if something broke in the food program, or the chef, wasn't able to get his macaroni and cheese out on time or something, they understood. And so
Yeah.
it was a great environment to be able to, to kind of progress with that. But so I'm guessing that like you were talking about, evaluating performance
Mhm.
live. I mean, this person isn't, cooking the toast fast enough, or isn't, doing the noodles fast enough, that kind of stuff. Is there a training module or something that goes along with that so that somebody isn't performing has an opportunity to learn, oh, if I did this, I could do that, and all of a sudden their performance goes up, or they eat right and their performance goes up, or I mean that kind of stuff. Is there a connection in that piece of it as well?
Yeah, 100%. Because now the chef knows exactly how to spend their time. And you ever walk in those kitchens and you see, the executive chef cooking, first thing you think of is something must be wrong. Like they're covering some shift or they're doing something because their head isn't out and they're not looking at the operation and they're not running it. When we
Right.
say executive chef, we're looking for somebody who can really understand the business and the flow. And so they are the best cooks in the kitchen, right? They have the most talent and skills, and they need to be able to spend time where it needs to be spent. And sometimes those days get away from you, and you look back and you say, "Okay, we made it, and we're gonna do it again tomorrow." But how
Yeah.
did we do today? And then, but that's what's happening with our staff as well. They're coming in not really knowing what they need to do, right? They might have a prep list from, that was made a month ago, and how is that evolving every single day, right? And so, the whole idea of prep cook too, every time we complete a task, the cook completes a task, it records the ingredient usage, like you said, the time. So that would be set in the recipe. So the chef's saying it should take you about 25 minutes to cook this pasta, guys. And if they can do it within 25 minutes, they get 100% on their efficiency score, right? But if it's taking longer, and then they can pinpoint this particular employee is it looks like they're struggling a little bit, and I'm going to go spend some time with them, and I know exactly what they struggled on because that was the task that they didn't complete on time. And so it all kind of flows into this, these dashboards they're looking at cost a little bit differently. I'm not a big let's count inventory, because you know what you purchased and you know what you sold, and then in between your waste logs and your production sheets, like counting inventory on top of that's just kind of like dead time to me. Like that's not the real stat. The real stat is what's actually happening inside the kitchen. And so you're right, all of that information for those prep cooks that are coming into the chefs gives them better details every single day. And then they're scheduling to the task too, not just a blanket schedule. we're given time and then we just use it and then we say, well, did we use the time wisely? And I think part of this is I would say, like, I'm trying to Amazon the industry, right? Like, you get to a point where you come into work and you know exactly what you need to do. And it's not like you can't take a break, like it's just a matter of, I expect you to be able to do these 6 things today. It looks, based on the time on these recipes, it's 3.5 hours of work. You've got a 6 hour shift, and let's see see what works. I think the best part about these types of, like I said, intuitive programs is that I anticipate in iterating many different times, as we get these kitchens onboarded and they start to utilize the system. And I think what the peace of mind though is that you can schedule out as far in advance as you want with the recipes you have and the tasks you want, um, and and before the person shows up to work, they know exactly what they're working on, right? So there's a clock in feature, so they just, they open up their phone or the iPad or whatever the station's going to look like for them. They clock in, the chef knows that they're there, they're active, they're working on their stuff. They've got full access to recipe books, which is, I think, it's harder right now for some of these bigger companies for people to walk home and say, do I have access to the central management system? Probably not. Did I get a printed recipe? Yes, but it's not scaling it for me. I can't click through it. So I don't, it's not evolving based on what I did last time with the recipe, right? And so we're always making those little tweaks. So that's why I said it needs to be intuitive, but the whole purpose is, again, to elevate the experience, not to replace.
Well, yeah, and again, I think that's the fear of AI is and robotics and everything else is it's going to replace humans. But in this case, to me, food is such a hands-on human experience, whether you're cooking it or eating it, there's this breaking bread together thing that goes on too, right? And that, but so yeah, I'm really curious about this. So the how how involved is AI in the equation, if you will? So, you know, prep cook X is not they performed to their expectations for the last month, and today they're not. And so is it, are they catching a cold? Are they, do they have a family emergency or or is it something I mean, does it get to that kind of a level where the chef can come in and say, hey, Sally, you know, something going on here and can I help you? Or, all that kind of, is it that intuitive so that you can kind of start to understand the whole kitchen from the dishwasher to the exec chef to a special guest that's coming in the dining room that day or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, what is it that intuitive?
Yeah, as much as it's used, the better it gets, right? So it starts to, the more interaction you have with your prep cooks, again, the better data you're going to get on their performance. It is in the backgrounds with, again, every single task that is completed, it's compiling a bunch of different equations. So it's even forecasting, like, for the next rolling 7 days, what you could be using based on what you have planned. And so that might be more information that somebody wants, like I said, when we're looking at an inventory. I have so on hand, but if I don't have it coming up on a recipe, then I shouldn't be just ordering it just to bring a part in, right? So, like, it's going to give insights that we wouldn't have had available at our fingertips as soon as the task is completed. And I think that's, to be able to track the trends of waste as soon as the task is completed, to really look at somebody and say, maybe this recipe isn't great. You always seem to have this much left over after this recipe, or so on. And so the contribution of those prep cooks is factored in as well, allowing them on a trend basis. There's what's happening today, what's happening last 7 days and the last 30 days, to kind of give them a picture that they can use. Anything greater than that, what's happening, 3 months, or 3 months ago or so on. I mean, hopefully they've made corrections to that point where it's really, I would love to see an improvement within 4 weeks. I think that's easy. That's justified for a human, as far as, I've learned a new skill. It's taken me 3 weeks to understand it, to develop that habit, to fully understand, and then we can make a reassessment at that 4 week part. So right now I have it scaled so you can see the day, you can see the 7 days or the 30 days for all the data points that are coming in.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's just freaking amazing. And I'm just starting to play with AI, and it sounds like I'm where you were, maybe a year ago or more, and I'm just completely blown away by its power and what it does and can do. I mean, and to me, it's left up to the individual, the creative person to figure out how
Mhm.
to use it even more. And again, as you talk, I think about, you know, food waste is a big deal to me. And I've tracked it. We did a lot with food waste at Microsoft, and to the point where we were doing predictive analytics, so we knew how many people were coming into the cafe tomorrow, and you know, and a week out, and then 6 weeks out, and and if you can do that, then you can
Mhm.
order and prepare so that you don't have food waste. You're preparing for the amount of people that come in, right? And so this whole AI thing really intrigues me, and it's just like I'm sure that, as you say, the learning that the machine does is so
Mhm.
powerful because it never, in a sense, never forgets. And so it continually learns and adds on to its learning so that it can become more and more efficient, right? And
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, in a kitchen, that's the dollars. I mean, to somebody who's trying to follow a budget, that's huge.
yeah, it is. You're right about that. I use specific, large language models for certain things because of the way it reacts, and then certain for others. And you're right. If you stay specific enough, like it will know who you are. Like, actually,
It's scary.
when I was generating the bio for this, it knew enough about me because of what I've been doing last year that I said, "Give me a bio for this podcast," and it was really good. Like so it is. But there's certain ones that allow you to create projects and you can upload data sets and it like helps you kind of stay focused because they are still chat models, right? So I'd say they're tools and you got to learn which one's for which, right? Which one's good for the analytics, which one's good for creation. And I think that would be helpful. But you're right, there's that's the learning curve we're in. We're kind of at that point of like no return where it's just not going to stop, it's not going to go back in the box. So can we work with it in a way that's going to enhance what we're doing right now? And I think that's the key. And when we get back into like the food as medicine and the opportunity that we have to be able to prescribe food that is actually needed right now for that patient, I think that's the next like breakthrough. And if that would be some, I wish I had enough data set to be able to create something meaningful like that when the patient's getting their order taken, the doctors put in the diet for that patient, and the diet is going to say they need so much folate, so much B, so much, vitamin C. And then that's going to look at the options that they have, on the menu. And that's when it becomes like a building block, right? So every recipe is its own building block. And then because humans wouldn't be able to do that in real time, but AI could look at it and say, these are the safe versions. And all you can have these two choices, Mark. You can have the cod with risotto, or the roasted chicken with butternut squash. And these fit your dietary analysis based on what you need today, based on the diet order. And that's crazy because right now we're still guessing, right? We still give you the blanket diet. If you got the regular diet, here's the special of the day. Would you like the meatloaf? At some point, we've got to be better than the meatloaf. And this is, I think, our opportunity to utilize, these types of technologies with the data sets that's coming in because it's good stuff, and let it help create an experience that nobody's experienced before. And so when you can, I think that would shrink the amount of time people are in these hospitals. It will help recovery. It would, when you look at the preventative medicine side, that's like a supercharge right there. And that's when I was working with Dr. Dean Ornish, I didn't have any of that technology. We just had his platform with the 4 pillars, and it worked really well. But imagine if you had something behind it saying, "Well, this is why."
Well, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, if you had sensors, if you had, sensors on your body, all of a sudden now you've got more data, and you can
Yeah,
plug more data into the machine that will then say, have the fish instead of the, chicken fingers or something like that. We were doing some stuff like that again at Microsoft where we had Bluetooth beacons in the cafe, and as you walked into the cafe, the Bluetooth would hit your phone and it would say, have the salad bar today instead of French fries or something like that. So if you
yeah,
put that kind of technology into actually measuring what's going on in your body, all of a
mhm,
sudden now, I what I see is a cattle prod, and when I reach for a French fry, it zaps me and says stop. That
yeah.
kind of stuff. I mean, there's going to be some triggers that say, if you eat like this, you're going to be better in the office, And if you don't eat like this, you're going to be worse. And so, and probably even maybe with the technology that you've got, there's ways to measure that, as how fast or how good are they working, and now you've got some data to be able to compare it. This is you're
There'll
onto
be a day. Yeah, there'll
yeah.
be a day. Somebody's gonna make it for sure. I don't know if I'll be the one, but it is. Yeah, you're right. I think that's where the two worlds collide, at least when it comes to healthcare. And I know, it's definitely spoken of. People are aware that, there's this power out there now that could help kind of, combine. You still would need, you know, oversight. You still need somebody vetting it and saying, yeah, this is definitely a safe choice. We wouldn't want, because that's one thing you learn too, is it's really smart, but it's really dumb, right? Like it doesn't know how to build prep cook. I had to tell it how to do it the whole time, right? Like
Right.
it didn't know my problems. It's just there to, discover stuff. And so I think it gets better at finding better quality information as these next versions come out. And I've noticed that over again the last year or so, just using it just to kind of play with it. But you can see it starts to understand just how humans are asking it questions. So it's very weird. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like this is like kind of a cool time. I always tell people like we bought the weirdest ticket. We were, because I'm 41 and like I've seen before the internet, basically during the internet. Now, I would say we're Web 3 right now. Like obviously past that type of stuff, or wearing the Ray Bans, talking to Meta and stuff. It's a little bit different, and we will be alive long enough to see the floating cars and everybody have their own companion robot. I mean, like, those are just things that are just like it's just gonna happen. I mean, it's not like they're not dreams anymore. Like it's gonna happen. It's the weirdest thing.
Well, and so you're a dreamer, like I'm a dreamer. Where's this going to go, and what are you? I mean, what's in your head as far as what's next? I'm guessing, you're pretty solid and working through all the intricacies and the growth of your product here, but what's next? What for you? I mean, is it what's stirring in your brain that says, "Whoa, wait a minute, I need to look at that a little bit deeper," or whatever? What are those kinds of things going on?
Yeah, I see the opportunity on the outside. So, we're looking at the mechanisms that are going to help the back of the kitchen operate just as it should. And I think that's what I look at. We're creating something that wasn't that it was over the top. I can't believe it. These are daily tasks that should be happening every single day, but just it wasn't being presented. It wasn't being tracked. These are things that are going to make everybody's workflow just a little bit better. And I love that it's frictionless. Everybody can use it, and it expands, and it's intuitive, and it can really elevate everybody's service right there. But that what's next is I think when you look at how supply chain has changed, sourcing and the movement for local sourcing, and it's like we're so close to being great in some of these areas, we just haven't been able to put it all together. It's like we still can't feed everybody in the world, but we were building massive structures in the middle of deserts. Like that's the part that blows my mind, where it's like but we also have to want to do it, right? So it's a matter of, is the problem big enough for us to justify the time to solve it? And that's when it comes into like these culinary opportunities. When in creating something, I kind of had to create it myself. I mean, I didn't really see anybody else creating something that would ebb and flow with the daily workflow of your business. And so I've seen plenty of recipe platforms and plenty of things, but they're not capturing what's actually happening. It's in, and with accounting, it's only data in is only as good as you put it in, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And so I always go back
Yeah.
to finance because I'm not your accountant, by the way. But it's this whole thing is very difficult, right? So that's yeah, we should be seeing more of these, very intuitive kind of business tools that are popping up, that are not just blanket, that are not meant for everybody, but everybody can use them in their own way. And that, I think, sourcing would just be unbelievable, just to kind of see where things came from, track them back to the fields. I know some of the bigger vendors, they have some technology to tell you specifically on recalls, like what part of the field it was, if they had this, and so they're really close, right? So it's like we are so close to being able to trace all of our food, to be able to provide the most efficient supply chain possible when it comes to food. um, and I get, but it's going to be the will of the need and want to. And but I think that would be the next thing. If I ever saw a version 2 of Prep Cook, it would be really connecting the world to food in a different way that the front of the house doesn't get a chance to see.
Well, and you brought it up with regard to feeding the world. So again, that sounds like something that's impossible. But, again, I stepped into a world again at Microsoft that we were growing our own hydroponic lettuce, and I had farms all over the world, and I was monitoring that farm from a Surface tablet in Redmond, Washington. And as we started to understand that, and the
Mhm.
idea that there's going to be 10 billion people on this planet in by 2050, it's like, how the hell are you going to feed them all? But there's
Mhm.
two things. One is, I think it can be done. That's the first question. Is you gotta believe. I think it can be done. It's just that it's everything. Something has to change, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about the supply chain. It's like, you know, we gotta figure that out so that we can get food to the people where they eat it. And that's again where I went
Mhm.
was grow towers and hydroponic growing. But there's also this food waste thing, right? And to me, there's enough food on the planet. We just can't figure out how to get it to the where it needs to be consumed, right? So
Yeah, it's like we're driving by the egg stands, but we just got the eggs from the store that took it from their distribution center in Texas, which is 4 states away. It's like that's the whole point. It's like it is close to us, but we just can't see it, and we've got to find something that allows us to see what's next to us, so then we can tap into it. Because there's a few restaurants here or there that are like really good about it, but we know how hard that is, right? To be able to schedule, routine pickups, and I did it for a minute, when I was working in Tanglewood, and there was a big storm, and so everything I had ordered was gone, it was washed out, and so I had to replan my menu. It's like you can't. Luckily, it was just a summer venue. It's fun, like you said. People understand, like it's cool. But if that was a business that I needed to really make money because it was the only outlet for revenue, then I don't know how I could rely on just placing that order just in case the storm comes. I have to rely on the bigger purveyors that are going to have that backup because they're going to tap into their DC from another state away, right? So it does. That's just how we're set up right now. But so we've got to find a way to show our locations what's available based on what's available, right? And so I think that could help with reducing the amount of subsidies needed for specific crops, and kind of free the farmers to grow what they want to grow and what they can grow, based on the location and where they're at. And so I can't tell you how many soybean fields I drive by, right? So when you see one, you're like, oh man, there's another one. We're really into bees and really into butterflies, and we haven't seen many butterflies at all this summer. And
uh,
totally different topic, but I mean that scares me, right? So yeah, I would
yeah,
say there's a lot of people. I mean, I think our birth rate in the United States is below where we need it to be, but overall in the world, we're not struggling, and there's still a significant need for a lot of people out there to be fed in the right way. So, but it's focused, and we're so bad at being focused.
yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk to you forever about this stuff. It's just intriguing, and it's interesting to me how what you're thinking about is crossed over with a lot of what I'm thinking about, and how we can do this. But we got a limited amount of time here. I don't want to tie up your world and your day forever, so I'll kind of maybe start to wrap it up with some what I call rapid fire questions. But you know, I, I you're in the kitchens a lot, and I have a thought as how you're going to answer this. But what's your favorite kitchen tool that's not a knife?
um, I'd say a microplane because it's all about the detail.
See, and I thought you'd say prep cook AI.
It would be a good plug, actually. A tablet, yeah. I know it's like the one time you're like okay with your cook looking at their phone. You're like, "What are you doing?" Prep list. Okay, it's cool. Go back to your prep
Yeah,
list. All good.
yeah, that's funny. One dish that defines your culinary soul.
That's a good one. Um, I I think a braised short rib. Something that's kind of low and slow. Um, you know, there's the time it takes to create a marvelous dish to me adds to the respect of the product and the whole thing. Like it's just if it's and to really get a great short rib, right, and just to cook it at the right temperature where it doesn't turn completely gray on you and it still fall off the bone. It's like, so we really understood it at a molecular level. I think that's that'd be one of those dishes that if I have a really great short rib somewhere, then I know that they truly understand how to cook.
And that's kind of inbred in you is that you like to have the ingredients be, right at your fingertips and make
Mhm.
sure that it comes out perfect at the end. And again, through the growth mentality of fail fast and move on, right? Totally.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Tech trend that you're most excited or skeptical about?
I can pick either one. I'm gonna go with skeptical because it's kind of funny. I am skeptical about lab grown meats. I don't like them. I I don't. I'd rather eat like a bean. I'd rather eat mushrooms. But when you get into the mycelium stuff, there's like something so weird about it. And then if you've ever watched the Last of Us show, you really understand why you don't like mushrooms, or I don't like mushrooms. I love mushrooms as a whole, but I think I'm skeptical about the lab process, developments. When that whole, Beyond Meats and Impossible kind of came out, I embraced it because at that moment we were in our vegan journey, and it was really about replacing plants as much as we could to bring back restorative health. And my wife's father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer at the time, so I was really trying my best to follow Dean Ornish, like in everything we just learned by going through that whole process. And I just never could get into it. I mean, it was, why is this fake meat bleeding, the whole thing. It was like the weirdest thing. So I think it serves a purpose, but if you're looking for a meat alternative and you're not truly vegan, right? So it's like you got to walk that line where it's like it is another marketing that's trying to capture a market segment over into a trend that was accelerating for quite a while, but I'd say it has cooled off a bit. So I'd say that would be what I'm most skeptical about is new lab grown meats that are popping up. Anyway.
So this is maybe a little bit where we separate because I've
Yeah.
followed cultured meat and lab grown meat for quite a while now, and it was very prevalent in Singapore, and Singapore
Mhm.
was one of the first countries that embraced it and made it legal and all that kind of stuff, and so they're kind of way far ahead of us. But the USDA now in the United States has approved lab grown meat to be able to be consumed.
Yeah.
And I get I'm not a big fan of the impossible or the beyond meat kind of thing, but this to me this cultured meat where you take a cell of an animal, whether or a fish or a mushroom, and grow it from a sustainability standpoint is huge. I mean, to me, because number one, we don't have to have as many cows. We don't have to have as much worthless corn to feed the cows to be able to, have the big steak on our plate, or whatever. And so I think about it from a sustainability standpoint to be able to, you know, have have enough land to be able to feed that 50 billion people or whatever. And if you can grow it in the and so I'm a boomer, right? And I'm skeptical about this all the time. But I have to tell you, these young kids that are coming up are open to that kind of stuff. We did
Mhm.
an experiment with crickets at Microsoft, and we put crickets. We went out in the dining room and handed people who wanted crickets to taste them and see. And the young kids went crazy because the cricket only consumes the amount of water that it gets from its food. So they
Mhm.
were looking at it from a sustainability standpoint and they just consumed it. The boomers in the room, they were like, wait a minute, I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm going to go for that because you're eating crickets, right? It has nothing to do with sustainability or any of that kind of stuff, right? So I I don't know. I think there's maybe some opportunity for lab grown meat to be able to solve some of these world problems that we have?
I'll make a deal. You
I,
grow some lab grown meat, I'll try it.
and I've never tried it, and I want to.
Okay.
There's different companies now popping up in the Bay Area
Yeah.
that I want to get to try it. I'm open to that, but it's like, man, I don't know. It's so new and
I
everything. Anyway, I
I
totally.
appreciate everything you said. Yeah, about sustainability for sure. I mean, I agree. I mean, that's why we embraced it at the beginning. It's just when you look at, how did Doritos get created, where it's like perfectly craveable, you can't stop. It's like it's a taste that you can't even identify, but you think it's Cool Ranch, right? So it's got these blue specks. It's like when you get to that point where it is designed specifically to trick your body into thinking it's something else. That's when
Yeah.
I get a little bit weird, because we don't have enough data on any of these engineered foods, even the stuff we consume for the last 20 years, to say that really messed us up. Like not only our gut bacteria, but like just, our whole makeup. Like we are as good as what we eat, right? And it's like we're eating stuff that is just has never been produced before. So it's kind of alien, but it could solve some sustainability issues for sure. And you never know. Open mind, open mind. I'm good. Yeah,
My mind is wide open on this kind of
yeah,
stuff too. It's like, I don't know, it's the idea of how we can use, we talked about sensors
yeah,
all the way through this thing. It's like we can use those sensors to be able to give us data. And then
yeah,
we start to trust it. If we eat a Dorito,
yeah.
our blood sugar drops and it like makes us feel like crap, but we still keep eating it. It's like, but if we start to get more data in front of us that says, hey, why don't you have a carrot instead? And it'll do this. It's great. But
You can
this
press a
has
button on
been,
your 3D printer and be like, "All right, my steak should be done by the time I get out of my next meeting." And it's
yeah,
that'd be crazy.
I love it. I love it. This has been phenomenal, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on here and talking all this kind of dreamy stuff. And it sounds like you're really taking the dream and making it real. So I totally appreciate it. It's awesome what you're doing, and I'm going to encourage our audience to join the Explosions meeting on the 24th of this month to be able to hear more about what you're doing, and then they can tune into this and hopefully get even a deeper impact of what you're going to talk about on the 24th. So really, really appreciate it, and thanks a lot for taking the time out to be at the Graybeard Wisdom Podcast.
Thank you, I appreciate it.